The manor loomed, a spectre against the bruised twilight. Hollow Creek Manor. Built in the grand style of a bygone era, it was once a monument to ambition and prosperity. Now it was a crumbling sepulchre, its grandeur faded to a melancholic echo of past glories. The locals spoke of the manor only in hushed tones, their voices laced with fear and superstition. They told tales of a family driven to madness within its walls, of unspeakable horrors that unfolded under the pale light of the moon. Some spoke of a ghostly woman in white, her sorrowful cries echoing through the empty halls at night. Others whispered of strange lights and unexplained noises, of a cold, unseen presence that watched from the shadows. No one dared to venture near the manor after dark. It was on a night like this, with the wind howling and the rain lashing against the crumbling stone, that a lone figure appeared at the gates of Hollow Creek Manor. His name was Thomas, a writer drawn to the manor by its tragic history and unsettling stories. He had come seeking inspiration, hoping to find within the manor's crumbling walls the spark for his next novel. He was determined to uncover the secrets that Hollow Creek Manor held. The heavy oak door groaned in protest as Thomas pushed it open. The air inside was stale and cold, thick with the scent of decay. Dust motes danced in the faint slivers of moonlight that pierced the gloom. He stepped cautiously across the threshold, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor. A sudden gust of wind slammed the front door shut with a resounding boom. Thomas whirled around, his heart pounding in his chest. It was just the wind, he told himself, a trick of the old house, nothing more. With a deep breath, Thomas turned away from the door and started to explore. He moved slowly through the darkened rooms, his footsteps echoing on the wooden floors. Each room was like a time capsule, frozen in a state of perpetual decay. Furniture lay draped in dust covers, their shapes barely discernible beneath the layers of grime. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He reached the grand staircase, its once polished banister now covered in a thick layer of dust. As he placed his foot on the first step, he heard it, a soft, mournful sigh, like the whisper of wind through the trees. It seemed to come from the top of the stairs, from the darkness that shrouded the upper floor. He froze, his blood turning to ice in his veins. And then he saw her, standing on the landing, bathed in a sliver of moonlight, was the figure of a woman. The woman in white glided down the stairs, her steps making no sound upon the aged wood, her head tilted as if studying him from beneath the veil that obscured her face. Then she moved her hand, a gesture beckoning him up the stairs. A low, mournful melody drifted from her, a haunting waltz that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. It was a melody both beautiful and terrifying, filled with longing and despair. Taking one hesitant step after another, Thomas began his ascent. The air grew colder with each step, the scent of damp earth and decaying flowers clinging to the back of his throat. As he reached the top of the stairs, the woman in white extended her hand. Her touch sent a jolt through him, a strange mixture of ice and fire that made him recoil slightly. She led him in a slow, mournful waltz, her movements fluid and graceful. Through darkened corridors they danced, the phantom woman leading him on a macabre tour of the manor's upper floor. Then, as suddenly as it began, the music stopped. Thomas stumbled, his senses reeling from the abrupt silence. He looked down at his hand, expecting to see the ghostly woman's hand still clasped in his, but it was gone. The woman in white had vanished, disappearing as quickly and mysteriously as she had appeared. A soft glow from the end of the hallway drew his attention. He walked towards it, his footsteps echoing in the silence. The glow led him to a set of heavy, double doors. He recognized them from the blueprints he had found of the manor, the library. Pushing open the doors, he stepped inside. The room was dark, lit only by a single flickering candle on a desk in the center of the room. The elegant script flowed across the brittle pages, each word a brushstroke painting a portrait of a life unraveled. The diary spoke of love, a love as fierce as the north wind that howled outside the manor walls. The woman in white, her name revealed as Eleanor, wrote of a man whose face remained a blur in Thomas's mind. He was a musician, she wrote, a composer of heart-wrenching melodies that echoed the yearning of her soul. Their love was a secret, one that could never see the light of day. As Thomas delved deeper into the diary's pages, a sense of unease settled over him like a shroud. Eleanor's writing, once elegant and flowing, became more erratic, the script a tangled web of desperation and despair. She wrote of shadows that followed her, of whispers that haunted her waking hours and tormented her dreams. Her last entry ended abruptly, the sentence unfinished, the ink splotched, as if a tear had fallen upon the page. He rose from the desk, his gaze sweeping across the library. The flickering candlelight cast long, dancing shadows on the book-lined walls. He sensed a presence in the room, a cold spot just beyond his vision. As he turned, he noticed something he hadn't seen before. Behind one of the bookshelves was a narrow doorway. He approached cautiously, his heart pounding. He pushed against the bookshelf. It swung inward, revealing a narrow stone staircase. The air was cold and damp, carrying the scent of mildew. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the rusted railing. He knew he should turn back, but curiosity compelled him forward. He stepped onto the first stone step, the candle casting eerie shadows. As he descended, he felt a growing sense of unease. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into a trap. Down he went, the air growing colder and more oppressive with each step. The silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of his own breath. He emerged into a small, damp room. A flickering oil lamp cast a dim light. In the center stood a grand piano, covered in dust. Sheet music sat on the stand, yellowed with age. Thomas recognized the haunting waltz. Then he saw her. She stood behind the piano, her back to him. The veil was gone. As she turned, Thomas gasped. Her face was a mask of decay, eyes empty sockets. She moaned, filled with pain and longing. Eleanor was no longer the vision of sorrowful beauty. She was a spectre of death, darkness consuming her, and she was reaching for him. Eleanor's skeletal hand, its touch promising an eternity of suffering, reached for Thomas. Her fingers, like icy claws, stretched towards him, their tips only inches from his face. Her touch, he knew, would be his undoing, a fate worse than death itself. Panic surged through him, a primal scream trapped in his throat. He stumbled back, his foot catching on the uneven stone floor. He fell, landing hard on the cold, damp stone. The single oil lamp hanging from the ceiling swayed precariously, its flickering light casting grotesque shadows that danced and writhed on the walls. Eleanor, her movements as jerky and unnatural as a marionette controlled by unseen strings, glided towards him. Her voice, a raspy whisper that seemed to emanate from the depths of the earth, echoed through the small chamber. "Join me!" she hissed, her breath a cold vapour that sent chills down his spine. "Join me in my eternal embrace." Her words, laced with an unspeakable sorrow and a hunger that transcended the grave, pierced his soul. He scrambled backward, his back pressing against the damp stone wall, his mind screaming for escape from this waking nightmare. Adrenaline surged through Thomas's veins, giving him a burst of strength. He scrambled to his feet, his eyes darting around the room, searching for an escape from the spectral horror that stalked him. There, behind Eleanor, he saw it. A narrow passageway, barely wider than a coffin, concealed in the shadows cast by the flickering oil lamp. He had missed it before, his attention fixated on the spectral figure that now blocked his only means of escape. He lunged, his shoulder brushing against Eleanor's icy gown. A jolt of pure terror shot through him as if he had touched a live wire. He suppressed a scream, the sound dying in his throat. He couldn't let her know he had seen the passage, couldn't let her see the flicker of hope that ignited in his heart. He stumbled back, feigning a terror he truly felt, his gaze darting between Eleanor and the hidden passageway. She advanced, her skeletal hands reaching for him, her touch promising an eternity of suffering. "There is no escape," she whispered, her voice a mournful sigh that seemed to seep from the very walls themselves. "This is your resting place now." Seizing his chance, as Eleanor's skeletal hand came within inches of his face, Thomas dived to the side, rolling across the cold stone floor. He scrambled towards the hidden passage, his heart pounding in his chest. He squeezed through the narrow opening, the rough stone scraping against his skin. The darkness swallowed him whole, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. He could hear Eleanor's enraged shriek echoing behind him, the sound reverberating through the narrow passage, chasing him into the depths of the earth. He ran blindly, his hands outstretched, his fingers brushing against cold, damp stone. The passage twisted and turned, a subterranean labyrinth designed to trap the unwary and ensnare the soul. The air grew colder, the darkness more oppressive. He stumbled over unseen obstacles, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The passage seemed to go on forever, an endless tunnel of despair with no end in sight. He had escaped Eleanor, but he was trapped, entombed within the bowels of the manor, his only companions the ghosts of the past and the echo of his own fear. The passage opened into a larger chamber, the air thick with the scent of mildew and decay. A single flickering gaslight illuminated the room, revealing walls lined with shelves, each shelf stacked with dusty, leather-bound volumes. It was a library, hidden deep beneath the manor, its secrets buried in the darkness. Thomas stumbled to a stop, his lungs burning, his legs aching. He leaned against one of the bookshelves, trying to catch his breath, his eyes scanning the room, searching for an escape. A soft, mournful melody drifted through the chamber, the sound familiar and chilling. It was the waltz of the woman in white. It seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves, from the ancient books that lined the shelves, from the very air he breathed. He turned slowly, his blood turning to ice in his veins. Standing in the center of the room, bathed in the flickering gaslight, was Eleanor. Her spectral form shimmered as if woven from moonlight and shadows, her face a mask of sorrow and longing. She extended a hand towards him, her touch beckoning him into her embrace. The music swelled, filling the chamber, its mournful melody wrapping around him like an invisible chain. He had escaped the tomb, only to find himself trapped in a ballroom of the damned, and he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he would never escape the waltz. Dawn painted the sky a bruised purple as a lone figure stumbled from the grounds of Hollow Creek Manor. Thomas, his clothes torn and his face etched with terror, never looked back. He left behind the echoes of the waltz, the spectral chill, and the woman in white forever entwined with the manor's tragic fate. The locals whispered of strange lights in the windows that night, of music that drifted on the wind, and of a figure dancing in the derelict ballroom. Some say that if you listen closely on a moonless night, you can still hear the faint strains of a mournful waltz echoing from the depths of Hollow Creek Manor, a chilling reminder of the love that death could not silence.